My name is Courtney Williams, and I am from Peekskill. I got my start in environmental justice activism fighting the expansion of the Algonquin, air quotes, Algonquin pipeline expansion underneath the Hudson River, underneath Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant, and 400 feet from my children's elementary school, 400 feet from my front door. I organized that work with Resist Spectra, Safe Energy Rights Group, and more recently, I have been organizing with WAS, Westchester Alliance for Sustainable Solutions, focusing on shutting down Westchester County's largest industrial air polluter, a trash incinerator in Peekskill. And if that seems like a lot of stuff for one area, you are right. And that is what makes Peekskill an environmental justice community. So from my front door, 400 feet from the front door, is the Algonquin gas transmission system that carries a large percentage of fracked gas from Pennsylvania to New England. I'm less than a mile from Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant, less than a mile from the Wheelabrator Trash Incinerator, 2 blocks from a BASF chemical plant, less than a mile from the PCB-laden Hudson River, numerous brownfield sites, and a sewage treatment plant. And while I am the white lady with a PhD in molecular biology talking to you tonight, a lot of my neighbors are Black and brown and not nearly as privileged as I am, and not as able to compensate for the tremendous amount of polluting infrastructure that's been dumped on our community. So I got started with my pipeline activism because it was literally at my front door, but that quickly transitioned into activism to protect Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant from the dangers of fracked gas infrastructure. That Algonquin pipeline expansion takes the pipeline 105 feet from critical safety infrastructure at Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant. And I think when you think of how often pipelines explode in this country, that is a really dangerous proximity. But it's also important to know that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was involved in the approval of that pipeline expansion. And while Indian Point is the only nuclear plant in the country crisscrossed by multiple high-pressure fracked gas pipelines, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission said it was safe. And I want to show you one of the pieces of evidence that helped them make that determination. So if you can't read this, you are not alone because it is illegible. And we got this from foiling the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, but that was part of their safety assessment for citing that gas pipeline expansion. And they approved it and they said it was safe. And years later, the Office of the Inspector General of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission launched an investigation that found that they'd actually reverse engineered the safety assessment to come up with an acceptable level of risk. So now we have 40 plus years of irradiated spent fuel at Indian Point, which has since been closed and is in the process of decommissioning, which involves demolition of the structures on top of that gas pipeline. We have a site wholly contaminated, the soil and the water contaminated from decades of leaks to the cooling system that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission knew was happening and allowed to continue, all with this reverse engineered safety assessed pipeline. So the alphabet soup of regulatory agencies that have failed us include the New York State PSC, DEC, DOH, DOS, DHS, and at the federal level, the NRC, the DOE, the EPA, and the FERC. And I can name them all, but regardless, there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen that were supposed to be watching out for my community, and they all failed us, including Governor Cuomo. And so now we are a de facto nuclear waste dump, and we have all of that nuclear waste on top of this gas pipeline system that is going to have demolition happening. And where is that waste going to go? Well, the Department of Energy thinks that they are going to take it to Croton Harmon commuter rail train station and put it on the Hudson line. and use that rail line to transport it to a non-existent permanent receptacle or some kind of interim storage facility that is currently against the law and would require a change to federal law. So really, there's nowhere for it to go, but because they're pretending that there will be, they're storing it now as if it's temporary. It's not hardened. This site, the Union of Concerned Scientists, says that this site will flood twice a month in the next 40 years. And there's no consideration for any of that. And I, as in my day job, am a cancer researcher. And this is really concerning for me because all of that polluting infrastructure, including the nuclear waste, that is a cumulative impact on public health. And the National Academies of Sciences put out a study looking at what radioactive exposures do to the public. And, oh, sorry, wrong prop was this study from the National Academies. And their conclusions are that low dose rate radiation effects on human health outcomes and the biological mechanisms of these effects are not fully understood. There is also increasing evidence that low dose radiation exposure may be associated with non-cancer health outcomes, such as cardiovascular disease, neurological disorders, immune dysfunction, and cataracts. So while Governor Cuomo plans this massive expansion, my community remains a community facing these harms that science is pretty clear we don't fully understand and cannot say are safe. And Governor Hochul is planning to expand this further. And there is evidence, and I'm sure other speakers are going to talk about it, but this is a recent paper from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences saying that SMRs, small modular reactors, which is what is the pipe dream that everyone thinks is going to be the nuclear answer, is actually worse in terms of radioactive waste. So as a community that's currently a de facto nuclear waste dump, that is a serious concern to me. And that is why I'm here tonight urging all of you to join me in telling Governor Hochul to stop this plan. Do not commit New York State to throwing billions more dollars in generating nuclear waste and in generating more environmental justice communities.